All right, David Holt here again with our office hours at Holt Law. In this video, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about a few things that Holt Law is doing to incentivize its staff and where I think trends are going in the remote workforce. So, hello again, David Holt here, healthcare attorney, business attorney with over 10 years experience, now operating in Minnesota and California. I want to talk about how we've grown our staff now to, I think, 14 US based staff and a number of staff abroad to support those. And what I think is the future of retaining good talent is really investing in your workforce and doing that with benefits that support the remote work lifestyle. So, a few things on how we operate. So, we are a completely remote virtual law firm. We have mailing addresses, offices in both states, but those are very, minimal, bare minimum requirements. And in the alternative, everybody is working from home. And so my job as the employer and owner, I believe, is to enable my staff to be as happy and productive as possible in their remote work environments. So a few things, right? We are switching over, and this requires really good numbers, to a KPI or key performance indicator driven model. And what that means is we're grading people based on numbers and production, not how many hours they worked. And I think this is very different than the way that a lot of law firms are structured, where everything's based around the billable hour. How many billable hours can you do? How much time can you bill, right? And that's just, you're trading time for really health at the end of the day. And I don't want to do that. I want to reward the staff that is the most efficient at what they do and happens to do it perhaps in a smaller time block, but still at a high value, high quality mode. And so I have some staff that really self regulate, right? They are able to hit their goals, they get it, they need very little supervision. They will, work at really weird hours, but ultimately probably much less than 40 hours a week when you average it all out. They take plenty of breaks, plenty of PTO, and it is perfect. I wish I could have 100 of those staff, but that's just not how the workforce is, right? I also have staff members where, you got to push them and direct them quite a bit more. And there's others where it's a lot more difficult to determine their numbers. We're going through that right now, where we're reformatting and re-going through our numbers in our key performance indicators. And it's not an easy thing to do. But all this to say, we're not basing our pay as much on, 40 hours overtime, that type of model, although we do have a base, 40 hours for benefits. But largely it's very loose. And so what I mean by that is, for absences that are less than 4 hours in a day, we don't require you to take any PTO, which, that to some employers, it's like, oh, well, aren't they taking advantage of that? And aren't you, going out of business by offering so many benefits? No, actually, it's used very sparingly by the staff because they're graded on their numbers. So if they were out, 3.5 hours Monday through Friday to try and game the system, that would show up in their numbers and it just wouldn't work out. There would be disciplinary action, they'd be redirected and probably terminated. But what I think that does is, when there's emergency situations where we have kids, somebody's sick, you're just having kind of a bad day, you need to take the afternoon off, boom, you can take it. You don't have to take PTO that you'd already kind of allocated for other activities. I'll talk a little bit about our PTO model here in a second. And I think that is the way of the future. Another thing somewhat related to that is, we do not have set hours unless it is greatly related to the needs of the client, and we have a daily huddle around the midday. I didn't want to do it necessarily in the morning. And by a daily huddle, I mean that's all staff. We're on for 15 minutes, either in Monday and Thursdays as everyone, and then on Tuesdays and Wednesdays with your respective departments. And so I do not have set hours for my staff. It's really, some people are much more productive at 5 a.m. Some staff are productive at 10 p.m. Generally, it's going to be best to follow a normal work schedule because it's easier to do some of those quick kind of impromptu questions and meetings with other staff. But I do not require that. But the way this would come up, hypothetically, let's say that you did have a lot of client interactions and you did have a lot of staff stuff where you needed to kind of do impromptu meetings. If you were working in the middle of the night or on weekends to kind of get your work done, there would be some friction there, and they would just kind of self redirect, and it's worked very well. So those are two things in terms of just time off and scheduling. And what I have my staff do is I have them time block. So on our Google Calendar, what I will do is the staff will actually time block what they're doing, or what they've done rather. And it's less of a, 6-minute increment, micromanage. It's more just for them to be aware of how much time they need for a project. Some projects we say, do 2 hours, check back, let's see your work product, that kind of a thing, especially when I'm dealing with the law clerks. But for other staff, it's just a way to keep an eye on their time. And it's actually really fun when you do this with your personal life, because you realize that you're spending a bunch of time, watching TV and dorking around. And you say, you don't have time to work out, you don't have time to do this, you don't have time to see your friends. But you look at your free time in a week, and all of a sudden there's all of this TV time and all sorts of stuff that you could probably use a little bit more productively. Okay. Next concept for staff is investing in their wellness. So first off, we cover 50% of health insurance premiums, right? We may up that in the future. It's under consideration, but 50% of health insurance premiums on what I consider is a pretty good plan. I've been using it personally, and I think it's great. Health insurance by itself is very expensive. So to have the employer do 50% in a group plan, I think is very valuable. Whoops. And in addition to that, one cool thing that we do is we have 1 hour paid per week for working out. And the only thing that I require is I'm looking for, a true workout. I'm not going to include a walk. Maybe if it was a very, like jog, right? Like fast walk, jog. I mean, we're looking for high intensity, right? Workouts. We even have a little policy on it. But what we're trying to do here is to remove the excuse that you don't have time to work out, and get our staff, the employees, in the habit of working out. Because I believe if staff is working out, if you look at the stats, they are going to be, more productive, happier, and just, going to have a better workday when it's broken up a little bit. And we'll probably expand that benefit as well. Another thing is right now we have more PTO publicly than Google, Apple, or Tesla, as publicly stated today, that we can get our hands on. And I do not automatically do PTO for holidays. What I do is I have a massive bank, and what you can do is draw from that bank. And for those that don't utilize their PTO, we do a cash out at the end of the year. So you can take it as cash. I think that's very fair. Or from this benefit bank, let's say you're not really into PTO, but you're into, you're getting more education, or you need it for childcare, something related to work, right? That is drawn against the benefit bank. So those are things that I think are good. I want to encourage staff to take PTO. I want them to take time off, reset. I'm not looking for a, work until you pass out type work culture. It just doesn't work. It's not sustainable. So we are actually gravitating towards what I would call smart unlimited PTO. Unlimited PTO sounds so cool, and oh my gosh, how do you do it? But what's interesting is that if you look at the average PTO days for companies that have implemented it, it's actually very low, because staff is very nervous about taking the PTO. It's actually much lower than what we currently offer at Holt Law. And so what I want to do is I want to be smart about it. I want to offer the PTO, but at the same time, I want to make sure we're smart. So, what does that mean for paternity and maternity leave? What does it mean for if you're sick, but, it's not really your fault, or you're just kind of having like a bad month? I think that the KPIs I was talking about earlier, the key performance indicators, will really set us free in how we judge someone and their use of PTO. And what I highly suspect is going to happen, which I think is okay, is we're going to learn that there's staff that is viciously efficient at getting things done. Maybe they only work, I'll, be dramatic about 16 hours a week. But with that 16 hours, they produce what most staff takes 40 to 48 hours to do. And so they're taking all sorts of PTO. They're still communicating with the other staff, and they're doing great, and they're getting their full salary. In fact, they might even get a 10% performance bonus, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more next. So we're trending in that direction. Now, with the use of the KPIs, another thing that we're doing is we're layering on the ability to get bonuses, and it's all just based on numbers. It's not based on who I like or who's been there the longest. It's all about numbers, right? And so there is a pathway that we're creating for you to get a percentage bonus of your base salary based on performance metrics. In addition to, there's usual bonus opportunities for, bringing in business and things like that. But these are all things that I think for someone who just, is really looking for and is incentivized by financial incentives, it's a path forward for that. Now, the last thing that we did and that I think is important for any remote work or virtual offices, I still think there needs to be some sort of in-person, work team culture and meetings. And so once a month, we do an in-person meeting, and that's an opportunity for the team to really hash out some of those ideas and things that are just so much better in person. It really builds the relationships, it builds rapport. There's some, there's jokes. We're getting jobs done. We go grab a meal together. And what I think that one of the struggles with a remote work environment is you're just kind of disconnected, right? It is what it is. I mean, there's pros and cons, and one of them is that you're just disconnected. And what we're trying to do is to create that culture, that work culture, where you feel connected and get some of those benefits of the, when you'd usually be around the grabbing coffee and you chat with people, or at lunch, you could impromptu or go knock on somebody's door if there was open office doors. So that's what we're trying to gather with that. Now, this month, we did our first in-person remote retreat. So now that we've expanded from Minnesota to California, one thing that we do an annual retreat. And we did our first one in California, Palm Springs, this last month, and had the California team meet the Minnesota team. So, the 10 or so staff at the time, we all met, we flew them out, stayed in a hotel, and really did, a bunch of team exercises. We're really envisioning the year, but also really got to, hang out and spend some meals and time together, get to know each other. I think that goes a long way for just building that social connection that I think does need to exist for a strong team to work together. That, that rapport, it just adds a little layer of trust, a little bit of fun, but not, it's not just for fun. It's to be able to have a little bit of a true work culture. And those are expressed in our core values as well. It's not just something we say, it's something we invest in. Finally, just as a little side bonus, one thing that we do is we promote your remote work office. So for example, the webcams, we get those for all of the staff. We get lighting for staff. We get microphones. We get headsets. We also get a second monitor, and any reasonable things that would make their job easier for remote work, we are open-minded to, and we're probably going to greatly expand that. I'm a big fan of plants, as you can see, and so we may integrate, a reasonable plant budget. At the end of the day, it's all about staff being happy in the remote work environment and making that work and adjusting the benefits to fit what staff actually want. So I hope this is helpful. Hope you can take some key takeaways if you are running a remote business yourself. We'll see you at the next office hours.